A typewritten note lies next to a dead man. A document examiner must read between the lines to lead authorities to the killer. A murderer writes, then destroys the story of his crime. Investigators will do everything to assure the tale ends with a conviction. And a to-do list scrawled on an ordinary piece of cardboard includes an extraordinary task. Detectives look to handwriting to prove a murder was premeditated. Among today's new detectives are the forensic document examiners. Under their keen eye, a scrap of paper or a typewriter ribbon can be as incriminating as a confession signed in blood. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, February 6, 1995, police officers responded to a 911 call. They arrived at the home of Ted Mills, his wife, Mamie Hernandez Mills, and stepson, Nathan Latu. Mamie and Nathan had come home from a dental appointment to find Ted Mills dead and the house ransacked. Mills lay with a shotgun wound in his head. The back door of the house showed signs of forced entry. The strewn clothing seemed to indicate a robbery had taken place.
328T dispatcher. Supervisor respond.
Then, police found a note.
If somebody's been through this dresser.
Typed on a torn sheet of lined yellow notepaper, it read, "This is for our bud that you sent to jail. Rest in peace." It was one clue that would speak volumes, not just in the words on the page, but in its paper and ink. Sergeant David Palmer of the Minneapolis Homicide Unit relied on the expertise of forensic document examiner Karen Runyon to help him read between the lines. Document examiners match writers with their penmanship, typists with their typewriters, counterfeiters with their forgeries. Using computers, microscopes, and digital enhancement, these new detectives delve into the minuscule world of paper fibers and carbon particles to solve crimes. As the document examiner in this case, it was up to Runyon to learn all she could from the slip of paper.
The note was collected by the crime scene people and brought to me, and I first made an examination to determine how the note had been prepared, and it had been prepared with a typewriter that used a carbon film ribbon, which told me that if the ribbon could be located, the ribbon could be read and matched possibly to this entry.
Runyon told officers to look for an electric typewriter with a carbon film ribbon, and if they found one like that, they should collect it as evidence.
As well, they should be aware that this document had a fractured lower edge to it, where it's been torn off of the rest of the piece of paper, and they should look for any pieces of paper like this with any fractured edge, or any type of tablet that this might have been torn out of.
While Runyon focused on the note, The police questioned the victim's wife and stepson. According to Mamie and Nathan, they were at a dental appointment when the murder occurred. They'd phoned home from the dentist's office, but no one answered. Ted should have been home, but they assumed he was sound asleep, since he worked nights and slept days. The note suggested the murder and burglary were a payback for a past burglary at their home that was foiled by the victim. Mills had helped send the burglar to jail. Sergeant Palmer initially believed the story, but the seeds of doubt were already sprouting.
Well, there was some truth to this, and we couldn't discount this. But at the same time, our experience tells us that generally burglars are not going to return or have somebody return and kill somebody because of an identification that they have made.
During questioning, which police videotaped, Nathan Latoux told police he saw a handgun next to Mills' body, but police couldn't find it.
Under that spelling, I don't have anything on here.
They were skeptical. Certain details didn't match Latoux's story.
They have 2 dogs in the house that bark whenever strangers come, and yet Ted Mills is sleeping upstairs and never woke up.
To Palmer, that suggested the culprit wasn't a stranger. But Mamie and Nathan's alibis had support. A caller ID unit at the house registered their call from the dentist's office around the time of the murder. Another detail nagged at Palmer. The place seemed ransacked in too orderly a manner, not the way a burglar would generally tear up a room.
We were suspicious about this because our experience as investigators, most burglars are not this neat, as we found contents pulled out so they could be put readily and easily back into the drawers that they were dumped.
And Latoux's 911 call to police raised further suspicion.
Yes, my father's been shot.
What happened?
We just got home. I was at the VA hospital with my mom. They broke in the back door, trashed upstairs, they shot him.
He just had too much knowledge that he was able to tell us immediately. Most people, when you talk to them and they're in a hysterical state like this, they can't hardly tell you what time of the day it is. All they're doing is screaming and crying and get somebody out there to help us. But this was a different thing. We had an uneasy feeling about this.
Something about the case didn't ring true. The pieces just didn't fit. The strongest indication that all was not as it seemed was a fingerprint on a broken window at the point of entry. It belonged to Nathan Latoux. When Nathan Latoux was confronted with the fingerprint evidence, he broke down and admitted his involvement in the murder. Days before the killing, Latoux said his mother asked him to write out in longhand the phrases typed on the note found next to Mills. Now, investigators had reason to believe that Mamie Hernandez Mills typed the note herself. But how? She said she couldn't read or write English, and there was no typewriter in the house. Police needed to find the typewriter used to create the note. Now that Nathan had implicated Mamie, Runyon and investigators began to focus their search. They remembered that Hernandez Mills cleaned houses for a living. Police decided to look for a typewriter in the last few homes she worked in. In one of them, police found an electric typewriter with a carbon film ribbon. The last few words of the note were clearly visible. They also found several yellow notepads with paper similar to the note. The ribbon was brought to Karen Runyon's lab for analysis. She was relieved to find the film cartridge had been left in the typewriter. If the ribbon had been used up and discarded, the case would have become even more complicated. To confirm the ribbon contained the full text of the note, she carefully pried open the cartridge.
I took the ribbon cartridge apart, and then I transcribed the ribbon itself, working from the final entry, which we could see on the ribbon as we took it out of the typewriter. I worked backwards from there, transcribing everything that was typed on that ribbon.
Runyon discovered the note had been typed 3 times. It proved that whoever typed it knew little about how to use the typewriter.
The first 2 times it was typed, there were spelling errors, and the typist must not have realized that there was a correcting device on the machine. And so they must have started over.
Runyon compared fibers that had been transferred from the paper onto the ribbon.
When the carbon is knocked off the ribbon onto the document, paper fibers adhere to that mylar strip that the carbon is on in the ribbon cartridge, and the paper fibers stay on the ribbon itself.
By matching the fibers adhering to the ribbon with the fibers on the note, Runyon concluded that the note was indeed typed using this ribbon.
You match the fibers almost like a fingerprint. The fibers are in a random pattern, and they've adhered to this ribbon in that same random pattern that they were on the paper itself.
With Karen Runyon's help, the sordid story inside the plastic casing began to unravel. Within the typewriter ribbon cassette lay the true story of what happened to Ted Mills. The clues were microscopic, but their significance was great.
In this case, I was able to match all the fibers in each of the letters on this note.
Karen Runyon had linked the note to the typewriter, and police linked the typewriter to Mamie Hernandez Mills. But the full story still needed to be told. Sergeant Palmer had to determine Mamie's role in the crime and a motive for committing it. He continued to coax more details from Nathan Latou.
He said that his mother had got the shotgun that belonged to her husband up from the closet upstairs and had gone over and had shot her husband while he was laying in the bed, sleeping. He, in fact, said that he went and got the shotgun that was used in the murder, took it down and concealed it in a room downstairs in the basement that was next to where he slept. Nathan eventually tells myself and my partner, Sergeant Krebs, what we wanted to know, that he and his mother were responsible for the death of Ted Mills.
Nathan Latou swore, however, that he didn't pull the trigger. By the same token, as he implicated his mother, he was also gravely concerned about her fate.
He's very worried about what's going to happen to his mother. More so than himself, he's very worried and very protective of his mother throughout this whole thing. He keeps admonishing us not to hurt his mother, not to do anything to his mother.
Mamie Hernandez Mills maintained her cool and her innocence.
When she's talking to us, she's very cooperative with us. I mean, she gives you the appearance to ask me anything. I'll tell you anything. But obviously, except for that one thing, she will never, even in this interview, admit that she had anything to do with the death of Ted Mills.
As the pressure of the interrogation began to build, Mamie turned against her son, just as Nathan had turned against her. She told police Nathan had raped her at gunpoint. Hearing this lie, Nathan Latou broke down again. He had been withholding his greatest secret of all. He and his mother had been having an incestuous relationship. 41-year-old Mamie Hernandez Mills had only recently reunited with 22-year-old Nathan Latou, whom she gave up for adoption years earlier. Now, Mamie was exerting a profound influence on her son. The police used that influence as leverage to obtain a confession from Latou.
We're saying, Mamie, your mother kind of pushed you to doing this, because she's the very strong, controlling person in this relationship that they have. Mother is controlling son.
Finally, Latou agreed to testify against his mother in return for a reduced charge of second-degree murder. At about the same time, investigators discovered that Mills had a life insurance policy through work, and that Mamie had called to claim it shortly after his death. With this motive now exposed, the shuffled events of that bloody February day fell into place. Mamie Hernandez Mills had typed the note on her employer's typewriter, using Nathan's handwritten note as her guide. Each time she made a mistake, she started over, leaving behind a telltale story inside the typewriter cartridge. Each keystroke pulled fibers from the paper, transferring them to the mylar strip on the ribbon. Nathan Latou faked a break-in at their home. He made it look just as a burglar had months before, but he left behind an incriminating fingerprint. As Nathan and Mamie climbed the stairs, they were careful not to wake Ted Mills. Upon entering the bedroom, they wasted no time.
Do it. Do it.
After killing Mills, the two faked the burglary. Mamie left a note meant to steer investigators toward an avenging intruder who never existed. Then, mother and son went to the hospital to keep a dental appointment.
Can we use your phone, please?
While there, they used a phone to check in at home, knowing their call would be registered by the caller ID unit. This call was the basis for their alibi. When they arrived back home, Nathan placed the 911 call to police. He later told investigators he'd hidden the murder weapon in a pipe and buried it beneath a tree. In court, he testified against his mother in exchange for a reduced sentence. Mamie Hernandez Mills was convicted of first-degree murder on April 20th, 1996. She is serving a life sentence. Nathan Latou pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 24 years. By leaving a note, Mamie Hernandez Mills and Nathan Latou meant to cast blame on a fictional intruder, but they left too much real-world evidence to the contrary.
The note was left next to the body, and that the note was part of a scheme to make this look like another type of crime than what it really was. And in that perspective, this was an interesting case, and the fact that we did find the machine with the ribbon.
For investigators Palmer and Runyon, a note meant to throw authorities off track led them right to the killer. In Virginia, a murder case was even more ironic. In a scrawled note to himself, a man made his deadly intentions terribly clear. The shooting death of an elderly woman in February 1995 brought police to a home in eastern Virginia. The only thing missing from the scene was $5 taken from the woman's purse. Police knew the crime was committed by 18-year-old Richard Webb, live-in grandson of the victim. According to police, Richard planned to kill his grandparents, steal their money, and take their van. The grandfather escaped when the gun malfunctioned. Unable to find keys to the van, Richard Webb fled on foot and was apprehended a short time later. Webb was guilty, but his guilt was a matter of degree. If police were right and Richard planned the killing with intent to rob, he'd be guilty of first-degree murder. But if he killed on a sudden, violent impulse, he'd probably receive a lesser charge. It was up to the police to determine the killer's intentions. While searching Richard's bedroom, police found an important clue in a torn piece of cardboard. On it was written a to-do list. Among such mundane items as play pool and watch movie was item number 8. It stated simply, kill. After that was get money and leave. The list seemed strong evidence that Webb had planned his crimes. It was turned over to Michael Moore, document examiner at Virginia's Division of Forensic Science in Richmond. In order to prove that Webb wrote the note, he'd need to look for similarities between the handwriting on the note and samples known to have been written by Webb.
Handwriting identification is based on the premise that handwriting embodies certain qualities and features which are sufficiently personal to serve as the basis for an identification of the writer.
Webb's murderous list, now classified as evidence, was securely sealed and delivered to Michael Moore. Our handwriting is as personal as our fingerprints. As youngsters, most of us were taught to write by imitating a standard system, often referred to as a copybook system. In spite of this standardized technique, we begin to develop our own personal handwriting that stays with us for life. These deviations provide the basis for analysis. When examining a document, Moore looks at speed, skill, slant and height ratio, proportion, and the overall appearance of the writing. Similarities as well as differences are scrutinized. Consistent combinations of features are what Moore seeks to identify.
Does it exhibit good line quality? Are there some unusual stopping and starting places? Does it have patching or retouching? Are there blunt beginning and ending strokes?
He set to work, applying a 3-step process to the handwriting examination. He knew from the start this was to be a challenging assignment. In the first phase, he was concerned strictly with the writing surface. Moore noted that something had been torn from the face of the smooth cardboard, exposing rough inner layers. Any handwriting on these layers might be distorted by the rough surface.
Portions of this particular piece of cardboard being so rough were difficult to write on, and there was some overwriting. Meaning that the person that did the writing had to actually write over several times in order to get a visible image.
Glue adhering to the cardboard interfered with the movement of the pen. Moore had to factor that into his analysis.
Some of the unusual or blunt, awkward movements, for example, where the ink or the pen came into contact with the foreign matter, with the adhesive. Is this the habit of the writer to square off this particular portion of this letter, or is this as a result of coming in contact with this amount of glue?
The first phase of the examination showed that the rough edges, as well as the glue, may have affected the shape of the letters. In item number 2, the bottom of the W in work is squared off where the pen hit the glue. If the writing sample contains letters with closed loops, the document examiner must determine whether they are the habit of the person who wrote the sample, or if they were created by the water-based ink bleeding and closing the loop. These variations in the writing surface can cause the letters to deviate from the author's normal handwriting, making it difficult to analyze.
Richard, how you doing?
In the second phase of examination, Moore studied the known material or handwriting known to have come from the suspect.
You would please?
Again, he faced a challenge.
Call Kara.
In custody, Webb was asked to fill out forms, take dictation on a piece of cardboard, and produce other writing to compare with the original list.
Watch movie. Go to town.
Moore made the comparison, but he found the samples inadequate. Webb penned the dictated writings in a very formal, controlled environment.
Kill.
The original list was undoubtedly written under very different conditions. The two sets of writing only vaguely resembled each other. Moore was able to say he had some reason to believe that Webb had written the list, but he couldn't be absolutely certain. To make a more conclusive judgment, he needed to see more of Webb's writings.
No two writings from any one person, even if they were done by the same person, will ever be exactly alike, meaning that they'll superimpose. It can't happen. People are not machines.
He asked the detective for additional writings from Webb. Because factors such as body position and writing surfaces affect handwriting, he requested the samples come from a variety of circumstances.
I wanted to talk to you. The type of medium that was written on, one would expect that it was probably not done at a table or at a desk. It could have been standing up, unsupported, and it could have been holding a piece of cardboard in his hand. Just no way to know.
The sheriff's deputies gathered an assortment of Webb's writing, including personal letters, cards, and some of his poetry. Webb had written these samples over a period of time, so they showed a wider range of his handwriting styles. Now came Moore's biggest challenge, the final phase of the handwriting examination, where he'd make the critical side-by-side comparison of the list and Webb's previously written material. For presentation in court, he used a black and white enlargement of the list. The features and characteristics used to identify handwriting take many forms. Some are conspicuous, some are subtle. On the cardboard list, Moore noted that the relative size of numerals to capital letters was consistent. The number 1 was taller than the capital C in call. The number 2 was also taller than the capital W in work. Moore found this same habit reflected in the known writings of Richard Webb. The significance of Webb's natural range of variation raised a problem for Moore. He had to account for Webb's tendency to form the letter R slightly differently each time he wrote it. In item number 1, the letter began well to the left of the spine, then continued on to form a rounded upper portion. In item 9, that capital R still began to the left of the spine, but the top portion was flat. Moore recognized the same variations of the letter R on Webb's known writings. They matched exactly the variations found on the cardboard list. The combination of these features led Moore to a single conclusion. He could state with virtual certainty that Richard Webb was the person who wrote the list on the cardboard and had therefore premeditated his crimes. Ultimately, it takes a human mind to recognize a human hand. While computers are helping to solve more crimes every day, Michael Moore feels his job is secure.
While computers are useful in some areas of forensic document examination, they really just are not applicable to comparative handwriting by the mere fact that they have no way of first of all, gauging the relative individuality of the question signature.
Even if 20 variations of a signature were scanned into a computer, it might still fail to identify a 21st signature as coming from that same writer. Computers do not have the ability to judge the range of variation or the circumstances under which the writing was produced.
computers are just not in today's, what's available in today's market, are just not capable of doing what the human can do.
When confronted with Moore's findings, Richard Webb pleaded guilty and received a life sentence for capital murder. Ultimately, handwriting analysis matched the killer to his crime. But when comparing handwriting, the analyst must always be certain he's focusing on the right clues. The most crucial writing samples may come from the least likely sources. One handwriting expert's small lapse in judgment fueled the flames of one of the greatest hoaxes in modern history. In April 1983, the world was riveted by the news that Adolf Hitler's diaries had been discovered in Stuttgart. The 60 handwritten volumes, written over 35 years, were found by a German journalist. To determine if the books were truly written in Hitler's hand, the German government enlisted a brigade of specialists, including handwriting analyst Ordway Hilton. Hilton was given 7 samples of Hitler's writing to compare to the diaries. Based on these samples, he declared the diaries authentic. It was an honest mistake that almost destroyed his reputation. Hilton was duped. He correctly determined that the author of the diaries also wrote the samples he used to compare them with. But his fatal flaw was his assumption that Hitler wrote the samples. He didn't. They were written by the same person who forged the diaries. That man was Conrad Cujo. The diaries were sold for more than $2 million before the fraud was exposed by an international team of document examiners, chemists, and historians. By studying the composition of the paper, the quality of the type, and other characteristics, they determined the diaries were no more than 4 years old. When the West German State Archives announced their findings, they discredited the books in no uncertain terms, declaring the diaries the grotesquely superficial concoction of a copyist endowed with a limited intellectual capacity. Even so, Cujo perpetrated the most expensive fraud in the history of publishing. If it weren't for the expertise of forensic examiners, he might have pulled it off. But incriminating documents seem to have a way of ending up in the right hands, especially if the crime is murder. In Smyrna, Tennessee, outside of Nashville, a man made a poignant televised appeal for help in 1994. Ricky Bryan, a 39-year-old welder, had a sporadic 5-year relationship with 72-year-old Charlotte Scott.
I did date the woman for a little over 6 years. And she's missing, so we gotta find her.
Scott had been missing for 2 weeks.
I wish she'd come back home, wherever she's at.
The family was hopeful she would be found.
I have to pray that someone comes forward.
Scott's daughter Rosalie reported her missing after finding her gone and her apartment door left open.
We just would like to know where she is.
Police department, anybody home?
Police searched Scott's home on October 19th. She was last seen filling a prescription and going to a money machine. Her car was parked outside her apartment.
Back door is still open. You want to check upstairs?
There were no indications of forced entry. All the signs of a daily routine were still intact, as if she would be returning shortly. With no clues to be found in the house, police turned to Ricky Bryan. They hoped he could provide some information.
Nobody is home.
At first, it didn't seem Bryan could help them. He said he was out of town when Scott disappeared and claimed they hadn't spoken in 3 months. But Brian helped police more than he imagined. Detectives E.J. Bernard of the Metro Nashville Police and Clayton Thomas of the Smyrna Police found a hole in Brian's story, a hole they hoped to climb through to get to the truth. They discovered Brian had used Scott's ATM card the day she was reported missing. Detective Bernard.
He told us he wasn't in Nashville, but we had proof of this through the camera, statements from his relatives, as well as the transactions from the bank, which was very close to her residence.
With that proof, Brian's alibi crumbled. But just because he took Scott's money didn't mean he was involved in her disappearance. Even so, the lie made him the only suspect in this crime of few clues. After he failed a polygraph test, police obtained a warrant to search his home. They were looking for ATM receipts, weapons, tools that might be used in a kidnapping or a murder, anything that could link Brian to the crime. They found nothing. They had no physical evidence and no more leads. The investigation ground to a halt. A few frustrating days passed before detectives received a break. Some of Brian's family members stepped forward. They told police he had divulged an outrageous story. According to Ricky Bryan, Charlotte Scott was murdered by a gang of drunken men at a rock quarry where the couple frequently met. Ricky had left for a few minutes, and when he returned, Charlotte had been killed. He knew the story sounded absurd, and he had no witnesses to prove he wasn't involved. So he decided to bury the body and deny he knew what happened to her. In one respect, police agreed with him. The story was absurd. But why would he concoct such a tale unless he really did bury Charlotte Scott? If the strange tale was his way of deflecting guilt from himself, it had the opposite effect. Police now had reason to suspect Charlotte Scott was murdered and that Ricky Bryan killed her. But they still had not a shred of evidence. When police confronted him about the story, he denied he ever told it. Even so, the story was the only lead they had. They began searching for the buried body. Despite their long hours and the use of cadaver dogs, they turned up nothing. Then, Michael Thompson, Ricky Bryan's nephew, approached Detective Thomas and offered his help. The 19-year-old would soon lead investigators to a spot in the woods and Ricky Bryan to a point of no return. Investigators rely on skill, wit, and luck to find breaks in criminal cases. In the murder investigation of Charlotte Scott, the break stepped forward in the form of Michael Thompson, nephew of Ricky Bryan. Thompson volunteered to speak with Bryan and hopefully learn the whereabouts of the victim's body. Police told Michael Thompson they'd appreciate him sharing any information he might find out. On November 15, 1994, Thompson went to visit his uncle. Bryan was extremely suspicious. He was convinced his house was bugged and that police were watching his every move. After searching his nephew for a listening device, Bryan and Thompson engaged in a stilted dialogue meant to mask the true thrust of the conversation. Bryan needed to recover a shovel and rake he buried in the woods with Scott's body. Here was his confession, but he wasn't about to say it out loud. Instead, he wrote it in a notebook. Each time he wrote a message, he ripped the paper from the notebook and burned it in a wood stove. He was afraid if they were found, the tools would link him to the body. And during the written communication, Brian sketched a detailed map pinpointing where the tools and the body were buried. Then he burned the map, just as he had burned the other notes. That evidence was gone. But not for long. After leaving Brian's home, Michael Thompson immediately called police. Following the directions he'd memorized from the map drawn by his uncle, he led them to a pit in the woods. There, they found a body.
327 T, Sarge. Definitely her. 327 T, Sarge.
There was an odor of decomposed flesh. We then started going through the items. There was a lot of debris. We pulled debris out, and at one point, Detective Thomas found the foot belonged to the victim.
393.
The remains were crushed and mutilated almost beyond recognition. With the help of an identification unit, Detectives Thomas and Bernard recovered and identified the body of Charlotte Scott. Nearly a month had passed since she had last been seen. The case had stalled for several weeks as investigators tried in vain to trip up Ricky Bryan. But now they could go forward. Charlotte Scott had been found. And Ricky Bryan's weird story about burying her body had led to her discovery. Police had what they needed to arrest Ricky Bryan, but not enough to convict him. They needed hard evidence that proved Bryan knew where the body was buried. The testimony of his nephew may not have been enough to convince a jury. They needed the notebook in which he drew the map. The map itself was unrecoverable, but if the notebook could be found, perhaps the remaining pages would bear its faint impression, proving Bryan had total knowledge of the slaying. Once again, Bryan's family helped police by bringing Detective Thomas the clue he sought.
In December, the brother of Ricky Bryan was cleaning up the house that Ricky Bryan resided in and came across a notebook. The notebook was then immediately brought to me. Upon looking at the notebook, I could see impressions of where something had been written on.
The vague impressions defied all efforts to read them. But Thomas was convinced they could be turned into hard evidence if only they could be made legible. For that, he depended on the forensic laboratory of the U.S. Postal Service in Memphis, Tennessee. Examining more than 17,000 documents each year, it's one of the busiest document evaluation centers in the United States. The lab is equipped to analyze anything having to do with ink and paper. They can regain writing that's been erased and even illuminate signatures that have been scribbled out. An infrared light source called a crime scope makes some inks invisible and others fluoresce, disclosing hidden writing. The lab usually examines documents relating to white-collar crimes, credit card thefts, forgeries, and fraud. It occasionally assists with outside criminal investigations, especially in cases of murder. Forensic document analyst Grant Sperry has been with the lab for 18 years.
Postal Service normally does not get involved in local police cases. Our primary responsibility is to assist or support postal inspectors in the investigation of their offenses by providing them with forensic expertise in the area of fingerprints or document examination. However, in certain cases, such as this one, where a heinous crime has been committed, we will offer our assistance.
Brent, what I have here is a notebook.
In November of 1994, Detective Thomas brought forensic document analyst Grant Sperry the notebook from Ricky Bryan's house.
The original map was
If these seemingly blank pages could be coaxed into revealing their secrets, Thomas would have the evidence he needed to convict a killer.
We can conduct.
He would depend on Sperry and the postal laboratory to decipher the faint impressions of writing left on the page. These telltale furrows are called indented writing. They're embossed on a blank page when the page above is written on. Would the ghostly impressions in the notebook tell the story of Charlotte Scott's murder? Would they be enough to convict Ricky Bryan?
Okay, Patricia, we need to photograph.
Using a fiber optic light source to illuminate the surface of the paper, Sperry determined that Bryan's notebook did indeed contain faint impressions of the map and other indented writings. After photographing it, he utilized the electrostatic detection apparatus, or ESDA. The ESDA would make the ghost-like indentations visible.
The beauty of the ESDA is that it's non-destructive for the most part. In other words, your document is protected by the film, the imaging film. You can retain a permanent record of any of your indentations that are developed.
Sperry placed the page from the notebook on a brass plate and pulled plastic film over it. Then a vacuum drew the film into the paper fibers and into the impressions. The film was then electrically charged while toner cascaded over it. The toner was attracted by the charge and filled the indentations in the film. Once the toner settled into place, Sperry secured it with a sheet of adhesive-backed plastic.
Next step is to take the clear plastic adhesive, which now has an image on it developed with our ESDA, and cut this image down to size, removing the excess plastic.
Before lifting the plastic film, Sperry smoothed it to remove air bubbles.
It's not uncommon.
A single document might go through the ESDA process 5 to 10 times to bring out every nuance.
See, here we have entries that appear to be school inside of a...
If necessary, the lift can be scanned into a computer to enhance and separate the image. In this case, the lift of the map was so bold that Sperry could read the indented writings with a magnifying glass. Thomas and Sperry were pleased with the quality of the lift and with the number of writing samples that emerged. ESDA disclosed every detail of the carefully drawn map, leaving no doubt as to where it led.
An arrow drawn to this little circled area. Does that mean anything?
Yes. This is going to be Industrial Boulevard. The roadway will be the pit.
The pit?
That the body was located in.
It was, okay. Additionally, you have the words shovel and rake alongside that.
On his map, Bryan used specific detail to describe where he buried his victim. This was the evidence detectives were looking for. Once he had a clear image of the map, Sperry compared the writing to known samples of Ricky Bryan's writing.
Well, in this particular case, not only was it important to have the details of the map, as they ultimately were revealed through this examination, but because we had writing available to examine, obviously since the details of this map are precisely and pinpoint precisely where the body was located, the author of the map, one would think, would have absolute knowledge of where that body was. So it became important to determine exactly who did, in fact, write it.
The writing samples on the map matched known samples of Ricky Bryan's handwriting. Sperry had proved that Ricky Bryan was the author of the map. Once all the evidence was revealed, Detective Bernard pieced together a likely scenario of Brian's crime.
He went to her house late one night, took her from the house, brought her to this isolated area here, killed her, mutilated her, and then buried her in a grave.
What led Ricky Bryan to brutally murder the woman he claimed to love? Some said it was for her money. Clayton Thomas feels differently.
I think he was really in love with her. I feel that that during this time she was breaking off the relationship, and I felt that if he couldn't have her, no one else could have her as well.
Ricky Bryan never admitted killing Charlotte Scott. To the end, he clung to his story about the mysterious gang of men. He was charged with first-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years before he'd be eligible for parole. When a killer leaves behind a paper trail, little does he know that he may have already signed his confession. Every document tells two stories. One is intended by the writer, and anyone can read it. But the other is a secret tale that sometimes hides a terrible truth. Document examiners are the tellers of these tales, who seek the indelible truth behind the paper and ink. Investigators are on the trail of a serial killer who's leaving behind a series of almost invisible clues. In Maine, police depend on a few paltry fibers to sew up a case against a deadly rapist. The evidence is in hand, but they have nothing to compare it against. Florida investigators confront a fast car, a fatal accident, an unlikely story. Can forensic scientists use fibers from the crash scene to find out what really happened? Tiny filaments, practically invisible to the naked eye, are the key to solving these crimes. In the lab, scientists can weave the truth from the shreds of evidence. In 1981, a peaceful hike in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, ended with a grim discovery. The body of a young man was lying at the edge of a field. For Atlanta police, it was the kind of scene that was becoming all too familiar. For 21 months, more than 24 bodies had turned up in fields, empty lots, and less traveled roads. The victims were young African-American males. Some were children. Most were strangled. At first, the crimes were investigated routinely. But as the murder count climbed, it became clear a serial killer was on the loose. He would leave few clues in his deadly wake. Parents of the victims demanded answers. And as more bodies turned up, police assembled a task force to find a link among the murders and to trace every clue. But the murders continued. Lawmen from the surrounding area joined citizens, even psychics, in the search for victims and their killer. a reward fund reached $100,000, but no one came forward to claim it. Racial tensions grew as panic gripped this southern city. Assuming the crimes were racially motivated, police looked for a white male, and the outcry for justice in the African American community grew deafening. As the death toll climbed past 20, investigators hoped it was only a matter of time before they caught the killer. But time was their enemy, and they had few clues. At the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, microanalyst Larry Peterson set his sights on the almost invisible clues known as trace evidence.
I began applying more or less full-time efforts into looking at the cases individually and also comparing them to see if they were related.
Peterson was counting on fiber evidence to be the common thread that bound killer and victims. By their nature, fibers are easy to pick up, hard to brush off. They provide a nearly invisible record of every place a person visits. By the same token, every victim was literally covered in hundreds of fibers, most of them meaningless. To find out which strands were important required a concentrated effort. Each fiber collected from one victim had to be visually compared against hundreds pulled from the next. Multiply that by 20 victims, and investigators were examining hundreds of thousands of fibers. The task could easily stretch into months.
It's hard to determine automatically what bits of material are important that could be from, let's say, a killer's environment, what bits of material is from the victim's own home, from places that they frequent.
Using a stereo microscope that renders the fiber evidence in 3 dimensions, Peterson analyzed fibers culled from the crime scenes and during autopsies. Their length, shape, and texture suggested some were from a household carpet, others were from an automobile.
I was still looking for any other kind of evidence that may link different cases together, in addition to the ones I had already found.
After scanning hundreds of samples, Peterson singled out fibers with similar characteristics. On most of the bodies, he kept coming across purple acetate fibers, as well as yellow-green fibers that appeared to be from a carpet. As the evidence began to accumulate, he needed more specialized microscopes. To see if they were from the same source, he placed the carpet fibers on a high-magnification comparison microscope. It allowed him to compare the fibers side by side. Their colors and shapes matched. Peterson was encouraged. Perhaps that was the link he needed. He now had proof that all the victims were connected in some way, and that they were probably killed by the same person. If he could figure out where the fibers came from, he could catch the killer. Fortunately, the fiber had an unusual structure. If he could locate its manufacturer, he'd be that much closer to solving the case. That required comparing the fiber against the hundreds of samples submitted by carpet manufacturers, an interminable and painstaking job that would add more weeks to the investigation. He couldn't do it alone. Hal Dedman, the FBI's master microanalyst, signed on to help.
My initial role was to assist the Georgia Crime Laboratory in attempting to identify these fibers, to see if the manufacturer of these fibers could be identified.
While the search for the elusive fiber wore on, young men and boys were dying. And Atlanta was scared. As the city's anguish continued, Hyde Post of the Atlanta Journal covered the story.
The mood of the city during most of the investigation was a real strong feeling of helplessness.
Desperate for leads, Atlanta police canvassed victims' neighborhoods and streets near where bodies were found.
Pretty much so,
They questioned people door to door, looking for any piece of information that might help them. At night, patrol cars searched the neighborhoods looking for anyone suspicious. On the streets, police had few leads, but in the lab, microanalysts were getting closer to pinpointing an original source for the unique fiber. The media caught wind that investigators were using trace evidence to tie the Atlanta area murders together. But publishing the news didn't stop the killer. It only made him change his tactics.
Suddenly, instead of in the woods or dumped by the roadside, the bodies began to show up in water.
The victims found in the rivers were either nude or partially clothed. Was the murderer trying to eliminate fiber evidence from being traced back to him? Lawmen suspected as much. Without alerting the media, and armed with the knowledge that the killer was now disposing of the bodies in water, scores of police recruits staked out Atlanta's bridges. They were fishing for a murderer that had eluded them for 22 months. Week after week, the recruits would secretly assemble under the bridges to keep their vigil. For all their efforts, officers dubbed them trolls. All they could do was wait for the killer to strike again. Around 2 a.m. on May 22nd, 1981, the calm along the Chattahoochee River was broken by a splash in the darkness. The trolls waiting under the James Jackson Parkway Bridge sprang into action to find the cause. But they could not see what made the splash. They radioed to nearby officers, who intercepted a station wagon and questioned the driver. His name was Wayne Bertram Williams, a 23-year-old freelance photographer and self-proclaimed music promoter. Williams didn't fit the assumed profile of the killer. In fact, as a young black man, he was more likely to be a victim. Williams told police he was coming home from a nightclub where he went to hear a new act he was considering signing. As a matter of procedure, police searched his car, then took his name and address and sent him on his way. Two days later, the body of 27-year-old Nathaniel Cater surfaced in the Chattahoochee River, downstream from the James Jackson Parkway Bridge. Cater, a black male whom the medical examiners determined had been strangled, fit the profile of the victims murdered in the months before. He'd been dead an estimated 2 days. The trace evidence collected from Cater's body was sent to Peterson. 2 fibers had been extracted from the victim's hair. In structure, they matched those found on the other victims. But the color didn't match. It could have faded from the water, or it could have been a mismatch. But viewing the fibers under polarized light revealed the structure of the fibers to be identical. Police decided to take a second look at Wayne Williams. After an interview and background check, a picture of Williams developed. He was a pampered only child, a college dropout at age 19. No one had seen him at the club he said he was at the night police stopped him on the bridge. Caught in this one lie, his alibi crumbled. Williams now became their chief suspect. They obtained search warrants for his house and car. Williams, feeling he had been wrongly accused because of his race, held a news conference to proclaim his innocence. But he didn't allow the press to take pictures.
They openly said, "You killed Nathaniel Cater, and you know it, and you're lying to us." They said that.
Some members of the African American community also found it hard to believe that Williams could be considered a suspect.
I think it was very difficult for the community to believe that an African American might have committed these crimes, that an African American had gone about systematically killing other African Americans. There was no history of black serial killers. Serial killers is a middle-aged white guy thing, or seemed to have been, and this ran counter to that pattern.
In the early 1980s, DNA testing wasn't available yet. All that forensic investigators had to go on were these small fibers. The strands seemed to point to Williams' guilt. His house was covered with yellowish-green carpet. Peterson collected as many fiber samples as he could. He also collected dog hairs and fibers from a purplish bedspread and from the trunk liner and glove compartment of Williams' car. Inside these bags of evidence could lie the key to catching the murderer. Peterson was hopeful that fibers from Williams' house would match fibers from the victim's clothing.
Took the evidence back immediately to the laboratory that very evening and mounted some of the samples up to see, does this have any potential or not? Let's just kind of see right away.
The violet acetate, along with the green carpet fibers from Williams' home, matched the fibers found on nearly all of the victims so far. But as strong as that evidence seemed, it simply wasn't enough. To make their case, investigators faced a staggering challenge: to determine how many other people in Atlanta had the exact same carpet. Based on the fiber evidence, Wayne Williams now looked like a strong suspect in the Atlanta murders. But anyone else in Atlanta with the same taste in yellow-green carpeting would be equally suspect. Police needed more to go on. They needed to find out how much of that particular yellow-green carpet was installed in Atlanta's homes. So they dug much deeper. Microscopic analysis of the fiber structure helped identify their manufacturer. The carpet was made in the early 70s, but that particular shade was produced for just 1 year. A little more than 16,000 yards of the carpet had ever been sold in the Southeast. In Atlanta, the calculated odds that someone owned the same kind of carpet as Williams were less than 1 in 8,000. The evidence was stacking against Williams, but not nearly enough to win a conviction. To narrow the field, investigators compared automobile carpet fibers found on some of the victims to the rug in Williams' car.
It was estimated that approximately 1 out of 3,500 cars in the Atlanta, Georgia area might be expected to have a carpet fiber like that found on many of the victims that were linked to Wayne Williams.
Put another way, the victims would have had to randomly visit 3,500 cars plus nearly 8,000 homes in order to pick up both fibers. The odds of that happening randomly were 1 in more than 29 million. Add to that the purple acetate fiber from the bedspread, and it became nearly impossible that the victims could have picked up these 3 fibers someplace else. The numbers didn't lie. Williams was arrested. To forensic scientists, the fiber evidence was overwhelming. To a panel of jurors, it might be confusing.
We wrote a story at the beginning of the trial that the prosecution's strongest case strongest evidence could be contained in a thimble.
More than just Williams was on trial. Prosecutors knew that the science that led to his arrest would also be scrutinized. The defense would do everything it could to snarl their credibility.
If you do enough searches and you find another environment where there's that same green carpet, what are the odds that there will be an automobile that had the same floorboard carpeting, or that the family would possess the same blanket and bedspread and throw rugs and clothing items? That's really the key. That combination cannot exist.
On February 27, 1982, Wayne Williams was found guilty of killing 2 men. The jury deliberated 11 hours. 10 other murders were definitely linked to him during the trial, and the task force closed the books on 27 murder cases between 1978 and 1981, connecting them to Williams on the same fiber evidence. The Wayne Williams case was the first time a crime was solved solely on the basis of fibers. The amount and variety of fibers found on Williams' victims snared him in a net of evidence. But in a case in Maine, investigators had far less to catch a killer. November 30th, 1990 was a brutal day in northern Maine. On that day, a worker at the Cummings Concrete Corporation in Alton called police after discovering the body of a young woman. The victim was face down. She was nude except for the socks on her feet. The rest of her clothes were piled nearby. Police on the scene contacted Detective Ed Thorne of the nearby Bangor Police Department. They knew he was working on a month-old missing persons case, and the victim fit the description of the missing woman. The State Police Mobile Crime Lab was called in. Investigators were on the trail of a killer. Potentially important clues like tire tracks or footprints had to be quickly gathered before someone accidentally or intentionally destroyed the evidence. Maine State Police crime scene investigator Craig Hanley supervised collection of evidence. According to Hanley, the very act of arriving on a crime scene can compromise the minute evidence.
If the crime scene is not properly secured, we end up with contamination or inadvertent contamination, sometimes by the officers themselves. It's very important for us to interview the first responders and to find out exactly where they walked, what they touched, what they moved, and what they removed. And if they've done the job properly, they should have everything noted so they can explain this to us. There's nothing better than for a crime scene investigator to arrive on the scene and find it in a very good condition.
The scene's original condition was recorded on film, and notes were jotted down on paper. Soil samples and debris were collected. In a case that might hinge on microscopic evidence, there was no way of knowing what might become important. Investigators had 2 questions before them. Who was the victim, and who killed her? The body was taken to the medical examiner's office, where an autopsy was performed and a positive ID could be made. Her clothing and physical features matched those of 18-year-old Lisa Garland, the missing woman that Thorne had been searching for. She had been reported missing 1 month earlier. The medical examiner later confirmed her identification through fingerprints. Garland was last seen around 1 a.m. on October 27th, leaving the convenience store where she worked. She lived only a short distance away. Bangor Police Detective Ed Thorne had reason to believe that Garland arrived at her apartment after she left the store. What happened then is an open question.
From there, she would have walked or got a ride down to her residence, which is approximately 150 yards from the store. We know she arrived because her pocketbook, her keys to the house, some money, and all her belongings were there.
The keys and valuables found in her house led police to believe that she had not left on her own. After a month, Detective Thorne and his colleague Bob Cameron saw their missing persons case turned into a homicide. The autopsy revealed the victim had been raped and killed by a blunt force to her head. Most of her internal organs were intact, preserved by the cool weather. At the Maine State Crime Laboratory, forensic chemist Chris Montagna analyzed trace evidence collected from the crime scene. Most notably, the socks the victim was wearing at the time of her death. He was hoping they would hold some small clue to the killer's identity.
We knew that one of the key pieces of evidence that we're going to be looking at are these socks. I began to process the socks simply by doing a visual examination, seeing what I could find, if there was any hairs or fibers, grass, anything that might be from the environment of the perpetrator.
He found maroon fibers. Experience told him they were from the carpet of an automobile. In terms of clues, it wasn't much. But Montagna felt the entire case could hang by this one thread of evidence. In July 1991, a 15-year-old girl was riding her bike on a lonely road in York, Maine, more than 200 miles south of Bangor. A car slowly approached and forced her off the road. She fell into the grassy embankment. The driver got out of the car and dragged the girl into the woods. There, he raped her, stabbed her, and left her for dead. Amazingly, she survived. After her attacker left, she found her way to a neighbor's house where she called for help. At the York Police Department, she picked out her attacker from the mugshot file. The suspect was a convicted rapist named David Fleming, who had been released from prison just 9 months earlier. In a state as quiet as Maine, news of violent crime spreads fast. After months of chasing dead-end leads to find Lisa Garland's killer, Detective Thorne heard about the violent rape in York. Bangor police became interested in David Fleming. Just maybe he had something to do with Lisa Garland's death. In York, DNA taken from the rape victim matched Fleming's DNA. Fleming pleaded guilty to raping and assaulting the young woman in York. He was sentenced to 80 years. The Lisa Garland murder case was still open. Bangor detectives believed that if they could match Fleming's DNA to samples collected at the crime scene, they'd have their man. But the DNA would have to wait. In the early 1990s, DNA testing could take months. Today, it takes weeks. If police were to prove that David Fleming killed Lisa Garland, they would need to rely on more conventional evidence. In this case, carpet fibers extracted from David Fleming's car. The fibers were sent to chemist Chris Montagna. He compared them with the ones found 8 months earlier on Lisa Garland's socks. Montagna placed each fiber on a separate stage of a comparison microscope to analyze them side by side. With a few adjustments, he could see that the pattern of dark and light stripes in the fibers lined up. When laid end to end, the fibers looked like one continuous strand, indicating that they came from the same source. It looked like the breakthrough investigators needed. The match allowed Detectives Thorne and Cameron to trace 8-month-old evidence back to David Fleming. Detective Bob Cameron understood the importance of the fiber evidence.
The fiber that was found on the victim's sock, that was matched to the carpeting on the vehicle that Fleming had been driving. And it narrowed it down considerably because the fiber that matched to the carpet in the car was the only year that they had put that color carpeting in those vehicles.
The results were now conclusive. The fibers matched. But would this single shred of evidence be enough to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt? Fortunately, an overlooked piece of evidence was found in the victim's body bag. It was a small chip of wood, hardly worth keeping. But Montagna noticed that it had been squared off, leading him to believe that the wood had been machined. Successful once with carpet fibers, Montagna asked the investigators to again comb through Fleming's car, to look this time for a speck of matching wood. Inside the trunk, covered by a large cloth, lay small hand-carved wooden boats. Fleming learned to craft wood during his previous prison stints. Montagna sent the chip and the boats for analysis. The results again looked bad for Fleming. The chip was made of white pine, and so were the model boats. The wood had all been machined the same way. Now there were two strong reasons to link Fleming to Lisa Garland. The fiber evidence and the wood chip showed that Garland was in Fleming's car. But none of this evidence proved that he raped and murdered her. Establishing that Fleming killed her would be much more difficult. He appeared to have an airtight alibi. Around the same time Lisa Garland disappeared, he was in the hospital with serious injuries. Lisa Garland was last seen alive when she finished her shift at the convenience store in Bangor around 1 a.m. on October 27th. At around 6 a.m. that same day, David Fleming was involved in a car accident that left him hospitalized for 2 weeks. Fiber evidence showed that Garland was in Fleming's car. But to prove he was her killer, detectives had to pinpoint exactly when she could have been there. Fleming would have had 2 chances to abduct Garland. The first was in the 5 hours between the time she disappeared and the time he had his accident. The second was the 2-week period between Fleming's release from the hospital and when Garland's body was found. An examination revealed that she was killed shortly after she was raped, but the cold weather had preserved her body and made it impossible to determine how long she'd been dead. Police knew she could not have been in Fleming's car while he was in the hospital, and the car was being repaired. So if they could prove she was dead before Fleming was hospitalized, it would mean that Fleming was her killer. Police needed some way of narrowing the time frame. Bangor police learned that an aerial photo of the crime scene was taken 2 weeks before the victim's body was found. While examining the photos, investigators made a startling discovery. At first, it was blurry and indistinct, but an enlargement brought it into focus. There, in the pit, lay the body of Lisa Garland. Here was photographic proof that the victim was dead before Fleming was hospitalized. That meant she must have been in his car before his accident. The fiber had placed Garland in Fleming's car. The photograph established the time of death. All indications pointed to Fleming as the killer. Detectives Thorne and Cameron felt they now had all the evidence they needed to win a conviction. Then came the clincher. The analysis of the DNA from the crime scene came back from the lab.
The DNA test was done at the FBI lab, and the results were that Fleming was definitely a match.
At the trial, the events of that night were reconstructed by the prosecution based on police speculation. Lisa Garland did make it home just after 1 o'clock in the morning on October 27th. David Fleming had followed her from the store. As she walked into her apartment, she forgot to lock the door behind her, a simple mistake that would prove fatal. David Fleming saw his opportunity. He then went into her apartment. It's not clear where he committed the crime, but fiber evidence proved that Garland's body was in Fleming's Delta 88 before he dumped it by the sand pit in the town of Alton. Fleming then returned home, where his girlfriend remembered him walking in around 3 o'clock in the morning. She recalled him not sleeping soundly and leaving around 5 a.m. About an hour later, Fleming got into an accident with an 18-wheeler. He was out of commission for 2 weeks, but the evidence showed he had already committed his crime. The fiber evidence linked the victim to his car. The photograph established an approximate time of her death. And the car accident closed his window of opportunity to just a sliver. On March 22, 1995, David Fleming was convicted of raping and murdering Lisa Garland. He is serving a life sentence on top of the 80 years for the rape in York. In case after case, fiber evidence has linked victims to their killers. But in a case in Florida, investigators relied on fibers to reconstruct the circumstances of a fatal car accident.
Was the emergency? Yes, some man just knocked on my door. He says he's had an accident and he thinks his friend's dead.
On a road in Tallahassee, Florida in 1994, a mild October evening turned terribly tragic. Strewn among broken beer bottles, snapped tree limbs, and mangled car parts lay the lifeless body of 30-year-old Michael Manella. A second victim, named Curtis Davison, was able to summon help before returning to the scene and collapsing. As paramedics treated Davison, Tallahassee police sized up the scene of the fatal accident. For crash investigators, time is even more critical than at a homicide investigation. At a homicide, officers can cordon off the crime scene and return to it later. Not so with a car wreck. Officers get just one chance to collect evidence. Traffic must return to normal as soon as possible. Crash investigators often rely on eyewitness accounts as a first source of information. But no one had seen this late-night crash. No one other than survivor Curtis Davison, and he was in no condition to make a statement. Crash homicide investigator Mike Walker had to rely on preliminary judgments based on the evidence he saw at the accident scene.
And what really struck me immediately was the passenger side of the vehicle was totally destroyed. The passenger door was nearly torn off the vehicle. We had an intact driver's side of the vehicle.
To Walker, that meant the passenger of the car would have sustained the most severe injuries. It was doubtful he could have survived, let alone walk away from the crash. But Davison told police he was the passenger. By some fluke, that may have been true. But could it be possible that Davison was lying to avoid being prosecuted for his friend's death? It was Walker's job to find out the truth. Investigators questioned anyone who might have seen the men before the crash. Witnesses told police that the two met at a local bar after work, where they had several drinks. They were then seen in another bar later that evening. Around 1 a.m., they left the bar and drove off together, but no one saw them get into the car. Without any witness, the detectives would have to rely on forensics to tell them who was driving. They first had to determine all they could about the crash and what factors were involved, like how fast the car was traveling. Returning to the crime scene the next morning, Walker and his partner, David Folsom, found the clues they needed.
The 300ZX suspect vehicle was traveling northbound on this road. As it rounded the curve, he began to lose control.
The driver turned the wheel to follow the curve, but the car's inertia kept it moving forward. As it left the road, it began to spin. Then it hit a tree.
The vehicle continued sliding sideward, striking another tree. As it struck the other tree, it went airborne approximately 40 feet, landing back in the road.
When a fast-moving vehicle changes direction, the tires slide sideways, leaving scuff marks on the road. By measuring these marks, called critical speed scuffs, and factoring in the friction of the road surface, investigators can calculate how fast the car was moving as it sped out of control.
The measurements from the critical speed scuff indicated that the vehicle was traveling at 89 to 96 miles per hour.
Almost from the start of the investigation, police had a hunch alcohol played a role. Broken beer bottles were found at the scene, and paramedics and officers detected alcohol on Davison's breath and on Manella's body. If Davison was the driver and was under the influence at the time, investigators needed to test his blood alcohol level, and quickly. A blood sample was taken within 2 hours of the crash.
So what time did you start?
It's very important that once we establish that there's suspicion that he is the driver of a vehicle, then we have to obtain a blood sample because alcohol dissipates from the system.
Walker and Folsom ordered the blood work that morning. The sample was taken to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Crime Lab to determine its alcohol level. First, the analyst takes a carefully measured portion of the blood she wants to test and places it into a clean, labeled vial. The alcohol in the blood is volatile. As the blood is shaken, it evaporates into the air or headspace of the vial. It's the components of the blood in the headspace and not the blood itself that's tested. The gas in the headspace is drawn into a chromatograph, which identifies its components and their concentration. The computer looks specifically for alcohol in the blood gases. In 10 minutes, it provides a reading. The results showed Davison's blood alcohol level at 0.04, safely below Florida's legal limit. But that was the level when his blood was drawn at the hospital, not the level he had at the time of the accident. Because alcohol dissipates from the bloodstream at a consistent rate, the analyst can calculate what the level was 2 hours earlier when the accident occurred. Davison's level at the time of the crash was estimated to be between 0.06 and 0.08. In Florida, a level as low as 0.051 can be considered driving under the influence. But investigators still had to prove that he was behind the wheel. Back at his office, Walker pored over the accident scene photos and compared them to his notes. Parts of Davison's story weren't adding up. First was the car's restraining system. Walker recalled the driver's side airbag had been deployed. Airbags, by design, pin the driver in place. If Manella were driving, it seemed unlikely he'd have been thrown from the vehicle. Yet his body was found some 50 feet from where the car came to rest. On the other hand, the passenger's side seatbelt looked like it hadn't even been used. Whoever sat here could have been thrown. One more clue aroused suspicion. A bloody handprint on the outside of the driver's side door. It was too smudged to read, but it seemed likely it was made when the driver exited the car after the accident. But according to Folsom, the evidence could be misleading.
Now, traditionally, we cannot say that just because there's a bloody handprint that someone driving that car put it there, because there's such thing as scene contamination. One of the rescue personnel or one of the police officers could have done it. But it was enough to spur suspicion as to who was actually the driver, the deceased or the survivor.
By themselves, the evidence of a bloody handprint, minor injuries, and an unused seatbelt meant very little. Taken together, they created serious doubt about Davison's story. Davison, however, was sticking to it, insisting that he was the passenger. The definitive version of the tale would be told in the lab. Investigators faced no shortage of clues about the car crash that claimed a man's life. The trick was to make sense of them. Crash investigator Mike Walker had the wreck towed to a secure impound facility for analysis. Ward Schwob is an analyst at the Department of Law Enforcement lab.
One of the parts of my job as a crime scene analyst is to go and examine a vehicle without any outside influences. A lot of the times I'll go and look at the vehicle itself and try not to learn any of the particulars about the case. I'll take an objective view of the vehicle, see what I can determine, see what the evidence tells me.
To piece together the particulars, he began with the driver's side seatbelt, fastening it in a position as if someone were wearing it. He noticed spots on the seatbelt near the door. They tested positive for human blood. That indicated the seatbelt was probably worn at the time of the crash. It also meant that whoever wore it was probably not ejected from the car. Signs again pointed to Davison. The evidence was suggestive, but slippery. Even if the blood proved to be Davison's, the defense could argue that it could have spattered onto the belt while the car was spinning, or that Davison could have bled on it after the crash as he staggered around the car. To seal this case, investigators needed to find evidence that fit 3 criteria. First, the evidence could be left only at the moment of impact. Second, it had to be unique to the individual who left it. And third, it had to prove where that person was sitting in the car. Investigators depended on fibers to meet those criteria, and they depended on Regional Crime Lab microanalyst Paula Sauer to read them. Detectives Walker and Folsom gave Sauer several pieces of material evidence collected from the accident scene, including a dashboard with 2 dents in it and clothing worn by the victims. The dents in the dash were on the passenger's side. It was presumed they were caused by contact with the passenger's knees. Remarkably, the force of the crash created so much frictional heat that woven patterns and fibers were actually melted into the vinyl.
There were fibers, numerous fibers embedded in the dashboard area that would be directly in front of the passenger seat. These fibers were microscopically consistent with the fibers composing Manella's pants.
The evidence seemed to indicate that Manella was in the passenger's seat. But Sauer wouldn't stop there. She scrutinized every piece of evidence to be certain her results were consistent. She turned her attention to strands of human hair and synthetic fibers gathered from the cracks of the passenger side of the windshield. Michael Manella wore a hairpiece composed of both human hair and synthetic fibers. If the fibers from his hairpiece matched those in the windshield, it would strengthen the argument that he was the passenger and that Davison, the survivor of the crash, was driving. An inspection of the synthetic hairs using a high-power comparison microscope suggested the fibers in the windshield matched those in Manella's hairpiece. But analyzing these fibers required more than a visual inspection because of the small size of their molecules. To complete her comparison, Sauer used an instrument called a Fourier Transform Infrared Spectrometer, or FTIR.
It is an instrument that is used to determine the generic class of synthetic fibers. By generic class, I mean whether it's nylon, polyester, acrylic, and this technique is very effective in that manner because it's actually looking at the molecules that are making up those fibers, so it can give you an exact identification.
The characteristics of both fibers were displayed on a computer. The red lines represent fibers from the hairpiece. The green lines represent fibers pulled from the windshield. In every way, they were identical. So far, all indications were that Manella was in the passenger seat. If that were true, it meant Davison would have left his mark in the area of the driver's seat, most likely on the airbag, which would have deployed at over 100 miles per hour. Sauer analyzed fibers clinging to the tightly woven fabric of the airbag. She found 9 fibers matching the fabric of Davison's pants. Her conclusion? Davison was driving. Paula Sauer used her sophisticated optics to put the accident scene into focus. Not only had she placed Manella in the passenger seat, but also determined that Davison was the driver. The evidence was handed over to the state's attorney, who showed in court that Davison lied about the events that unfolded in the early morning hours of October 6, 1994. The prosecution's theory was that after a night of drinking, it was Curtis Davison who got behind the wheel of Manella's Nissan 300ZX. Anxious to test the sports car's power, Davison put it in high gear, racing down the tree-lined 2-lane road. Ignoring the 35-mile-per-hour signs, Davison climbed toward 90. Then the narrow road started to curve, and Davison lost control. No longer heeding the steering wheel, the car slid sideways and careened off an oak tree. Michael Manella, in the passenger seat, was thrown from the vehicle. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The sports car continued to spin out of control, smashing into another tree before coming to rest on the side of the road. Davison, saved by the airbag, crawled out of the car. He went around to the passenger side to look for Manella, his bloody left hand leaving a smear on the door. Manella was dead in the road. Davison went for help. A Tallahassee jury took just 10 minutes to find Davison guilty of manslaughter by culpable negligence. He was sentenced to 7 years. The analysis of tiny fibers, traces of evidence found in ordinary items, turned the tables on 3 men who denied any involvement in their respective crimes. The ability of forensic scientists to pinpoint the makeup of fiber down to the most microscopic detail allows prosecutors to tear alibis into shreds of evidence.
damage.
Stay still! Derbyshire traffic cops.
It does have warning markers for potential firearms.
Turn over! You're under arrest. Intent to supply class A drug. Police 1,000 square miles.
It's a crash.
You got any other injury other than your head?
With some of the UK's most dangerous roads.
How nobody's been killed out of this, I don't know.
Do you know how fast you were going?
It's scary when stuff like this happens.
In life and death situations.
Get on the ground, you'll be tasered! We've got runners. Face down! Yes, successful sting.
Around every corner.
Great acting, mate.
There's a new challenge for the traffic cops.
Step out of the vehicle now!
Stay there.
Stop grabbing me like that.
Coming up.
Get out of the car! Get on the down!
Cracking down on drug gangs.
This is the largest amount that I've ever seen or had any dealings with.
I'm just the driver. So stop.
Ruling through fear.
I just had one criminal had a knife in my back.
And the dealers.
You're being detained under Section 23 of the Mischief Drugs Act.
Cashing in on the victims.
Police!
From an A2 units, looking at this vehicle and intelligence, the suspects of this vehicle, they are linked to drug supply.
That's Tango 19.
Go ahead.
Yes. I'm about 2 miles from north.
With drug seizures on the rise, officers like PC Craig Dawes are out targeting drug runners.
The drug trade is really, really significant. I think it's become a big problem. It appears now that the amount of drugs that's being seized, the ease that drugs are available, the vehicles that we're stopping that's containing drugs, it just seems that it's part and parcel of life now, and it's quite openly there.
Vehicle is being followed. Everyone knows that. Forward stop. Everybody stop on it.
Leicester from Derbyshire Traffic, Oscar Tango 19.
Get on the Tango 11. Vehicle is lane 4 and 4. Hampton Junction, as we speak.
Colleagues from other forces have got behind a vehicle that they believe is involved in high-end crime. The officers have got unmarked cars behind it. They don't believe that they're being compromised. They're able to follow the vehicle quite closely.
From Oscar Tango 19 Derbyshire, you have got myself, our performance fully marked if I can assist in any way.
That's brilliant. Is there any possibility of a stinger site around there?
There's only the slip road, but it's very, very busy at this time.
Subject vehicles committed, M1 North. If the Derbyshire Mobile can get a stinger site, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I can wait at exit slip, and then if it continues, I can assist you. I think you've got an ARV as well behind me.
Do you want to take command of your resources onto your force area?
Yeah, 19, I'll take control if that's okay, then I'll put it on this channel and start putting some plan together.
Oscar Tango 3-1, I've just been tasked. That's all my head, thanks.
Other units, including traffic cop Nigel Waller, are rushing to assist.
Yeah, I think we've got 2 units now, plus their units behind, so we could put a TPAC on. If you let us know when it's committed, we'll form up and drop in behind you. If you keep a running commentary.
Because we are on our way from Wakefield down the M1. For information, the securing traffic, solid, slow moving.
It's Friday afternoon, the volume of traffic through Derbyshire is really, really heavy. It will backlog very, very quickly. And, you know, you're thinking, what's going to happen here?
Derbyshire, so we've got ability to get one of our cars out, put a rolling block on. Yeah, 1-4, I can do that. Yeah, I'll put the safety on after the tanker.
plan initially is to surround the vehicle and box it in. But with that option, you've still got a risk because you then bring in members of the public into play.
From Oscar Tango 1-4, block is on, M1 northbound. Oscar Tango 1-1, we are 2/3 of a mile. Preemptive tactics is the preferred option at this time. Should the vehicle fail to stop, then initial pursuit is authorised. Subject vehicle is committed, M1 north, passing the off slip.
Yep, from 19, we are on the entry slip, waiting for you to call that you've gone past.
Yes, no worries. Lane 4 and 4, passing on slip. 4 and 4. Subject vehicle moved into lane 3 and 4. Traffic is slowing significantly. Speed is 2020 miles per hour. Yeah, at your call then, and the Derbyshire unit is calling, I think it's appropriate to put a box on. Tango 1-1, subject vehicle has moved to lane 1 and 4.
It's going to be aware of our presence now because of obviously the marked unit. It's gone from 4 to 1. We need to get it on.
Tango 1-1, move up. Oscar Tango 1-1, subject vehicle is high. Oscar Tango 1-1, subject vehicle is now boxed in.
Get out! Get out of the car!
Get out of the car now!
Get out!
Go, get on the floor! Get on the floor! Turn over! Get on the floor! Get on the floor! Give me your arms! Give me your arms! Cuffs, we've got him.
At the moment you're in possession with intent to supply class A drug. Right, we're on the side.
One,
Pick up at the moment,
yep.
move your legs in.
Move your legs in.
Front.
Vehicle stop, no damage.
And
Bell detained.
on your arse, and we'll get you. Right, you alright now? Right?
Yeah, okay.
Good. We'll slow things down now, alright? But at the moment you're under arrest. Right? What we'll do, turn the caution, say anything you see is evidential. Alright? We'll get you off the motorway and we'll get you dealt with. Appropriately, alright?
I'm just the driver.
Hey, come on, let's get you up.
Right. 3, 2,
1, up you go.
Right.
Is you alright? What, this one? Yeah. Come on, pal.
Are you happy to move? Those cuffs all right, yeah?
Are you alright?
I've got a broken right shoulder, yeah.
That's it, shed load. It says 10. It's 10.
As soon as the boots open, we realised that, you know, this is quite a significant amount of drugs in the back.
We'll take this as well.
Turn my means off, please.
NA from 19, I don't know obviously what's been passed. We're going to take this gentleman and his car so we can get the motorway opened again.
The officers move the suspect and his car off the motorway so they can be properly searched.
It's always difficult when there's heavy moving traffic and you're trying to get around the other subjects going to and from. I think he was going to think about going, but luckily we all worked together, knew what we were doing and got the box on. One male detained, and it looks like a large quantity of drugs. He's got a lot of questions to answer. He's a suspect, but you've also got to look at is he a victim of cuckooing? It does happen, and people do get bullied into it, you know, and they rule with fright. Cuckooing is something that we're finding where these gangs will target the vulnerable. That can be from basically befriending them to then taking over the flat or house where they will go and deal the drugs from, or being made to transport drugs up and down the country through fear of violence, and it's becoming more and more common. So what we do now is we need to get the vehicles off the motorway. That's the main thing. You know, a motorway lane 1 and 2 at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon is not the ideal location to do any kind of business. So yeah, we'll get to the services and we'll sort it from there.
We'll put them in front, Stack. All right.
You're not so tight, please.
There you go. Put my fat finger in there, so plenty of room.
Nothing sharp that's going to hurt me or you?
No, sir, no. I'm just the driver.
At the moment, we've got to go through a process, all right? And that process starts here. So we're going to go to Ripley Police Station, where you're going to go to custody.
Don't sit me in a cell for ages.
We're not. No, we'll try to.
Yeah, go in there, mate. Come on, sort it. All right.
They aren't benches.
The driver is being taken to custody for interview.
We've located a large cardboard box with 10 green packaging. I believe that packages now could be cocaine, with an estimated value of each block possibly £40,000 a block, which at this stage we believe it's going to be £400,000. Street value, roughly, it's been estimated it may be over £1 million worth on the street.
It's estimated more than £9 billion worth of illegal drugs are sold in the UK every year.
This is the largest amount that I've ever seen or had any dealings with through my time. Just shows you what is being transported up and down that motorway on a daily basis, where, you know, you'd think it wasn't. You look at the car, does it stand out? You know, no, it's just a general bog standard car. With that in the boot, you know. Normally these cars on a Friday, you've got your Aldi, Lidl and Tesco shopping in. It's instead we've now got a large quantity of drugs that's been seized. So, you know, it's a great result.
Hello.
Coming up.
Where's your number plate?
A suspected runner on two wheels.
What's a motorbike making off to me in Derby?
Desperate to get away.
Into a park.
Yes, vehicle's failing to stop.
And more drug pushers.
One's alighted from the back.
Making a run for it.
There's another one out and running.
Putting users under threat.
So stop.
I've just had the knife in my back.
Later. So let's have a look at it.
With drug offences on the rise across Derbyshire, traffic cops like Andy Swift are looking out for suspects running drugs.
Hello. Where's your number plate, my friend? Yes, thank you. What's that intent about? What's a motorbike making up to me in Derby? We're currently 55 miles per hour. It's permission for pursuit, please.
Location 47.
And Bolton Lane, speed is currently 50 and a 30. DRA is low.
We get people riding on mopeds and bikes, driving around dealing drugs, and it is a countrywide problem. There's a massive demand for controlled substances, Class A drugs, Class B, Class C.
Can we get a local stinger, dog unit and potentially MPAS if possible? Pursuit, vehicle is right.
Sierra 4 towards you. Sierra Jim Martin, continue at this time, please. Then over Pierce West Street, into a park.
The vehicle is currently going off-road into a park. Stand by. It's safe to continue. The vehicle is into the fields.
Thank you for that. Any units can start making their way down to Derby Road or Snelsmore Lane, which may come out on that way. Fellow Landsway. Go to Fellow Landsway.
For information, the rider is wearing grey tracksuit bottoms. He's got a black puffer jacket on. He's a white male, I'd say early 20s, and he's got a black helmet. Full face.
Are you staying on this bit, Swift, in case it decides to come back?
I'm going to stay where I am, mate. Yes, that's my plan.
Drugs are the sole motivator for most crime. People who are committing your burglaries, your shop thefts, theft of cars, commercial burglaries, most of it is down to pay for drugs. And as soon as you stop one person who's at the bottom of the chain dealing drugs, someone has replaced them 3 hours later, just doing the same thing again.
It's very difficult to catch these people because obviously they just go off road, but they're always worthwhile trying to stop.
There's probably a good 8 hours of the shift left, so let's see what else we can turn up.
Across town, traffic cop Sergeant Scott Riley is also on the lookout for drug runners.
I think drugs are a big issue everywhere, really. I can't really say whether it's any worse here than it is in other places, because obviously I've only worked in Derbyshire, but it's certainly a problem that's not gone away for my 22 years of service.
5 minutes later, he spots another suspicious vehicle.
And they receiving us Tango Sierra 4?
Yeah.
1015 vehicle, please, check please, at column number 2459. I suspect this will just be a bit of a boy race. Yeah, there's something up with this. Yes, vehicle's failing to stop. Advanced driver, pursuit, T-Pack, DRE follow at this time. Weather conditions are wet. Speed is 60. Right.
While Scott pursues the suspect, Andy and PC Dan Mitchell race to provide backup.
Units to correspond, possible sticker on.
Take it 47.
Yes, DRE still low on the brakes, on approach to the junction, and it is a left. Speed is 70. Can I have MPAS and Oscar Juliets, please, on approach to that junction?
Where are we best going? Coming this way.
Right, and then a left.
We're going to go back to the main road.
Yeah, we're still within the estate. Yes, one's alighted from the back.
Finger, please.
So another one out and running. I believe now there'll just be one driver in the vehicle. So stop. Another unit to me, please.
Where are you?
I've just had a knife in my back. Telling me to go.
Safe and well detained.
I just had one to criminal, so I had a knife in my back. I'm not giving you no trouble. I'm not giving you no trouble. That's why I stopped for you as soon as you got out.
1015 person check, please. 2459.
Oscar Charlie 15.
Quite a bit of arrest history, controlled class A, heroin, crack cocaine.
Yeah, lovely. I would suggest that's what his friends were doing. You been drinking tonight?
No.
I can smell alcohol in your breath.
Can you?
Yeah?
There is supposed to be a smell. Stinkingly.
There's some dealers.
Really?
Told me to get him away far enough. So you've seen me let him out, surely?
Pump zero around the end of the tube. Go on, continuous left to take stop. Keep going. Hang up.
Otherwise we're doing 16 statements.
The driver's under the ego limit. Right, of course you pass the roadside breath test, but because of the manner of your driving, I suspect that you're under the influence of something. I can also smell cannabis. So my colleague's going to do a drugs test on you, all right?
Sergeant, there's a large machete in the back of this vehicle.
Oh,
that'll be what I had in my back.
Okay, so you're saying you're under duress to drive like that, do you?
He told me if I didn't get him far enough away from you to jump, he was going to stab me.
That's why, as soon as they got out of the car, I stopped.
So what were they doing in your car then? How did they get in your car?
I was just about to score off them.
What I suspect that they're doing with him is he's a drug user. They will be using him to drive them around Derby because he's insured, he's got a licence. They will be doing their deals, they will be delivering their drugs to anybody in Derby. It's like a bit of an Uber for the drug dealer, really. And they will just slide him his drugs free of charge for his night's work.
While Dan waits for the results of the drugs wipe, Scott deals with the driver.
At this moment in time, I'm arresting you on suspicion of dangerous driving, failing to stop for the police, possession of an offensive weapon and possession of cannabis. And you'll go to Derby custody and then you'll be interviewed, and everything that you're saying about being under duress, you can tell us on interview, all right?
As you can see, cannabis and cocaine, there's a red line on the control line and then there's a red line on both the test lines, so it's positive for both. So we'll go and have a blood test now back at custody.
Drug driving's a big problem, but we've now got kits where we can test whether a driver's showing positive for cannabis or cocaine, and the hit rate on it is startling, really. I'm further arresting you for driving whilst under the influence of a controlled substance.
A search of the car raises suspicions further.
There's the you see knife in back down if you want. Oh, we've got another one.
Oh.
Well, these combat knives, don't they? There's two knives. That was on the floor on the rear side and near, so passenger side. It's probably about, I don't know, blade's probably about, what, 15 inches long, maybe? And then there's another one, another combat knife, and that's probably about, what, 12 inches probably. So I'm sure if they were to be used on you, you won't come out very well. So I think they call them, some potentially zombie knives, I'm not really sure, definitely combat knives.
It's horrendous to think that they're on the street. They've got no need to have those. There's only one reason, that's to obviously to hurt someone or to intimidate someone. That's all it's there for.
I don't say this often, but I believe him. One's ran out, then another one's ran out, then he's stopped, and there is a big knife in the car.
Yeah. He will be trying it. And he's heroin user, isn't he? They'll be cuckooing, won't they?
Yeah, they'll be just running him about to deal the drugs, hence why there's a deal of cannabis on the back and a bit of money.
And he's stopped.
And a big knife, and then he's stopped when they've run off. He's clearly a drug user. Possession of those knives and the failed stop, I would suggest that's going nowhere because they're not his knives. I wouldn't suggest. I would believe that they're the lads that were in the back. And if they're saying that we're going to kill you if you don't do this, then who wouldn't?
The people at the top of the drugs trade are just exploiting people, from the low-level dealers to your drug users. It's the people at the top are the ones that need to be targeted. And I know they do get targeted, but more often than not, it's the people at the bottom that fall.
Cannabis is there, a very small amount. Not a huge deal whatsoever. So I imagine that whatever drugs they did have on them, they probably ran off with the other two that were in the car. And obviously they'll find some other poor victim to drive them round and deal the drugs as the circle unfortunately continues.
We've got it. We've got the vehicle.
Coming up.
Scratch. You're being detained under Section 23 of the Mischief Drugs Act.
Derbyshire's road crime team hunt down a suspected dealer.
Police! Police!
Scotty, do you want this phone?
Drug dealers really don't want us to have access to their phones.
It is bright daylight, so we haven't even got the cover of darkness to assist us at the moment.
Millions of pounds worth of drugs are trafficked around Derbyshire every year.
There's nothing there, is there? To give us any kind of cover. Not down there either.
PC Nick Lovett and the road crime team are tasked with cracking down on dealers.
Our main work on the unit is drug related. These individuals are dealing controlled drugs within Derbyshire. We will actively hunt these people down. Persistence and patience is key in our role. We're given a tasking and we won't stop until that tasking is complete.
Even though we are in plain clothes, in plain cars, and there's persons on the unit that have worked this area as a beat area before coming onto the unit, so we're all quite well known for some reason.
Nick and the team are responding to intelligence about a local suspected dealer.
We get information linking this individual to the supply of controlled drugs we believe to be Class A drugs within the area of Ripley and surrounding areas.
The main aim of the game today is to go out, locate him, stop him, search him, and see what we find on him.
Yeah, Victor 4 will find a plot location. Is that plot location near Vex Crest? Yeah.
Sergeant Luke Christian and PC Dave Bull are also on the lookout.
The individual is linked to certain properties in the Ripley area. We know he has access to certain vehicles. Those are the main source of our attention.
The vehicle we're looking out for, one of them is a Nissan Qashqai and the other is a Ford Transit Connect. We'll just try and get as close to him as we can in plain clothes and plain cars and jump on him before he can run. The challenges that we'll face where we want to be looking is staying undiscovered really by the locals. We have to look at an area and we have to judge how long we can reasonably stay in the area for. Hey mate, it's Nick. I'm literally on plot. Where do you want me to cover, mate?
Just park up out of the way of each other, somewhere around there. You've got to follow us for.
It will do, mate. Will do.
But after 4 hours, there's no sign of the suspect.
He lives to fight another day, doesn't he? But he will come at some point. We have to get lucky once. He has to be lucky every day he goes out with a load of drugs, so.
We have to go again another day.
We've got 4 unmarked cars out. Yeah, it's just a case of flooding the area with police cars and trying to find him.
And that's just how our work is. We don't give up.
There's no sightings of the van or the Qashqai. We're standing it down.
Day 1, nothing. Day 2, still nothing. Day 3, again, drawn a blank.
He lives to fight another day.
We will go again and again until we've stopped the person who we need to stop.
The plan is on a rainy Wednesday, we're back out looking for the same lad that we've been looking for the last couple of deployments in Ripley. We're back out with 4 unmarked cars to try and locate him, see if we can get him stopped.
And here we are on day 4, going again.
You have to be a little bit patient, not force it. You can get a little bit downhearted when day after day after day that you don't get a result, but when you do get the result, it makes it all better. Sky, I missed a little bit of that. What have you got, mate? We've got it. We've got the vehicle.
One of my colleagues has seen the subject vehicle turning into the car park and into a parking bay.
Hey, Pop, right?
I'm good.
How's it going?
All right, mate.
Okay, mate.
What's crack?
At this moment in time, you're being detained under Section 23 of the Mr. Drugs Act for the purpose of search, information linking you
and the vehicle to the supply of controlled drugs. Yeah. Okay. Obviously, the objective of the search is to find out if you're in possession of any controlled drugs or not. Okay.
I've literally just been and bought some.
You've just been and bought some.
Where is it? In the middle here.
In the middle?
Yeah.
Where?
In that egg thingy.
In
that egg thing.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to hand you over. Yeah, I've got all them. Where is it?
In the middle, in the egg.
Okay.
A little Kinder egg.
In the egg. What is it?
Pardon? What is it?
Cocaine.
It's not uncommon to offer an amount up, so we're always cautious as to whether they've offered that up knowing there is another further amount, and they hope that we will just take what they've offered up and leave and not search properly. Well, that certainly isn't the case with us.
How much is it, mate?
6, I've just bought.
Okay. And I'll be honest with you, mate, you're going to get locked up.
I know, yeah, I agree.
I'm going to search your house.
Yeah.
There's nothing in your house.
No.
You sure?
Yeah, nothing, no.
Your phone?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, what's the PIN number to it?
Not
telling us. Okay, fine. Just to let you know, okay, at this moment in time you're under arrest on suspicion of possession of intent to supply Class A controlled drugs. No. Okay?
How long have you been technical?
It's been a while, mate. Okay.
Yeah. A Kinder egg, which contains a quantity of little small dealer bags of white powder, which he's saying is cocaine. So he's off to custody, and now we're going to go and do a search at his home address. A little bit of time is of the essence, really, because he's quite well known, so we need to get to his address quite quickly. We're in, no issues. Bit of a result that we've been to have to put the door in. There's a female and 2 children in there, so you have to be mindful, obviously, of not scaring the kids and things. And yeah, we've got a job to do, but obviously we don't want to scare the kids, do we? So we'll go and start searching and stuff. Get it done as quick as we can.
We are looking for anything drug related, anything to prove the individuals linked to the supply of controlled drugs.
Scotty, do you want this phone?
We locate a mobile phone. Mobile phones can be key to us within the investigation, and a lot of drug dealers and drug users really don't want us to have access to their phones.
Oh, we're all done in there. Just got to do the cash card. Very clean, very tidy.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you want us to go in before you get there? We're going to a linked address that we've also got a warrant for, so we're just going on to that address quite quickly, really. Probably not as fruitful as we'd hoped, but there's certainly items of interest in there. Found a phone, hopefully that's linked to him. What number? Is this it? Yeah? Police! Police!
We're there to prove or disprove the information that we're getting. That these individuals are actively dealing controlled drugs from properties on the streets within Derbyshire.
Nothing further is found at the second address. Nick and the team return to base to check in the evidence.
We found a quantity of drugs, mobile phones. When it's all pieced together, I believe that it will prove his involvement in supply of drugs. Persistence does pay off. Keep going and going and going, and that's down to the team's work ethic and drive to be taking these individuals off the street.
He's then failed to stop for us and thrown out them 5 bags of white powder.
Coming up, a suspect tries to ditch the evidence.
We suspect it to be Class A, possibly crack cocaine.
Drug test, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the test line, you can already see there's a line coming up.
No, you can do it.
No,
me,
that's
no,
fine.
never do it.
Contact the vehicle.
Yeah, no worries. I'm quarter of a mile from junction 26, so I'll not be long.
Near Derby, PC Andy Swift is responding to a call for backup.
There's been a report earlier on of a vehicle that's made off from some Amber Valley divisional officers where they've stopped it, and then when they've got out, it's drove off and it's thrown a load of packets with white powder in. So I'd imagine it's probably drugs related. Doesn't take a genius to work that out. I think by pure chance they've located it again, and it's actually been located, I think, parked up. Good skills, everyone. Thank you. Hey up, mate, you alright? We just come across it. It's quite good news, isn't it, mate?
Not liked it.
No one?
Yeah.
Is it you it failed to stop for earlier on?
Yeah.
Was it?
We'll have the car, but I think it'll need a proper search.
Do you want to shift this if we've got a key? We'll go up to Screwfix.
With the car on a busy road, officers decide to relocate to a car park to search it properly.
Want me to drive that?
Yeah, if you want, and then we'll all go up in convoy. How's that?
We got keys for this.
Mate, it's here on the dashboard, I think. Yeah, we'll follow you up. So we're just going to go on, drop the car off for a better location.
If a car's believed to be involved in drug dealing, obviously we've got the power to search it, and we're going to search every inch of that car to try and find the evidence that we need to potentially end up prosecuting someone. We don't want to let anything get past us.
So we were driving along, a vehicle's gone past us at the junction, high rate of speed, so we've gone behind it with the intention of stopping it and wondering why it was going so quick. He's then failed to stop for us and thrown out them 5 bags of white powder from the driver's window. We've then managed to locate this vehicle in the next town over and secure the driver, and he's currently arrested and pending interview. We suspect it to be Class A, possibly crack cocaine.
No further drugs are found.
Has he got any insurance or at all? No.
But now they need to check whether the suspect is driving legally.
Have you got proof of it with you?
What is proof?
Well,
Insurance?
yeah.
Yeah, you just give me this one and I tell you in my
No,
email.
no. Have you got a policy document? Have you got access to a policy document? You've got
Yeah,
one,
if you let me to find
No,
it.
not at the moment, but I'm saying you have got one.
Yeah.
And have you got a licence?
I have Albania license.
Have you got it with you?
No, it's not with me.
That's bad news then, because how do we prove you've got a licence?
I'm going to require you to provide me a specimen of saliva, okay? Because I've got reasonable suspicion that you might be under the influence of drugs. So, I'll perform a roadside drugs test, okay?
Drug test, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stick your tongue out, like that. And I'm going to scrape this on your tongue, okay?
Okay. You can do what you want, bro.
So this test for cannabis and cocaine.
Okay.
He's been subjected to a roadside drug test. I think people don't realise how long it stays in your system, and I think it's so much more prevalent nowadays. I think a lot of people who would not drink drive don't realise that they are drug driving.
Okay, so it'll take about 10 minutes to work.
Okay.
And we'll see what the results are, okay? Yeah, do you want to come sit in their car for us?
My car?
No, their car.
My car. You're coming to the police station.
Police station?
Yeah.
Why?
You're under arrest.
Arrest?
Come on.
Why arrest me?
Yes, do you want to put cuffs to the rear though, just?
Yeah.
But I just got the cuffs on straight away as soon as the vehicle.
Why?
Sure.
Can you tell me?
Jump in then.
Yeah, jump in.
Hold the seatbelt for me, mate.
Tell me why you say me arrest.
We'll tell you you're getting custody, but it's been explained to you.
Yeah. I've seized both his mobile phones and drugs. I think that goes without saying.
Starting to show up a line. Already, as you can see.
That's, yeah.
So if you want to further him, because it's positive.
So it's 1854, but further under arrest on suspicion of drug driving, okay?
No, drug driver, bro.
So you do not have to say anything, but it may harm the defence when questioned. Something they found court, and if you do say they've given evidence, So on the test line, you can already see there's a line coming up.
No, you can do it again,
So
but
what-
maybe
so-
it's wrong.
No,
me,
that's fine.
never do it.
So what happens, you'll go to your police station, and they'll do a further test, an evidential test, to determine...
You can do every test,
Yeah,
but that one
that's
maybe
fine.
is wrong.
So they'll do that at custody. This is just a preliminary test at the roadside, and they'll
That
do an
one maybe is
evidential
like
one
a
at the
pregnant,
police
bro.
station, okay?
Put it first
Lovely.
one.
He's failed a drug swipe, he's got no licence, suspected of not having any insurance, and he's failed to stop. Coupled with the fact that obviously there's been drugs thrown from the vehicle, so he's the type of person that is going to basically cause carnage on the road.
With more than 200,000 drug offences recorded across England and Wales every year, the police are clamping down.
The use of counterlised drug supply is massive, and it is a countrywide problem. It's very easy money. You can see why people who haven't got much in life, like a lot of these unfortunate people haven't, do what they do.
Ideally, we'd like to take out the top people, but to get near anywhere like that is proving difficult. So you tend to target your kind of medium criminals involved in it, maybe the ones that are being used as mules to move the drugs around the country.
They've been fighting the war on drugs for many, many decades before I was born, and they'll still keep fighting it. It's all well and good the police doing our bit, but you're scratching the surface, and as soon as you stop one person who's at the bottom of the chain dealing drugs, someone has replaced them 3 hours later, just doing the same thing again.
For every car that we stop, there's probably 10 that manages to get through the net and goes on to deliver and makes a lot of money out of it. But if we just rolled over and gave up and said, well, we're fighting a losing battle, then what's the point? So we'll always try his best. And even if we take one car out, at least it's one car that's not then going on to sell drugs or ruin somebody else's life through crime.
In this episode,
Get out of the car! Go, get on the floor! Get on the floor! Cuff, you've got him.
the driver caught transporting £1 million worth of drugs
I'm just a driver. Right.
was remanded in custody.
This is the largest amount that I've ever seen or had any dealings with.
At court, he received a 30-month prison sentence for drug dealing.
Hello. Where's your number plate, my friend?
The rider on the electric bike
The vehicle is into the fields.
was never traced.
So stop. Call the unit to me, please.
The suspect, who claimed he was being exploited by armed drug dealers,
I've just had a knife in my back.
was arrested for dangerous driving, failing to stop, possession of an offensive weapon, and possession of cannabis.
Oh, we've got another one.
But released without charge.
That'll be what I had in my back.
And no action was taken for drug driving.
You've been detained.
The man the road crime team arrested was found guilty of drugs possession and cannabis supply.
Where's it?
In the middle, in the egg, in the little Kinder egg.
He received a 12-month suspended sentence and 200 hours unpaid work. And the driver who allegedly failed to stop for police and threw drugs out of the car
So this test for cannabis and cocaine.
Starting to show up a line. Already?
No, you can do it again,
So
but
what-
maybe
so-
it's wrong.
No,
me,
that's fine.
never do it.
remains under investigation while police await the results of further drugs tests.